And so we come to disc 4 of 4. This was the one I was the most interested in because I knew it had a bunch of old projects that I'd sort of worked on and never actually finished or turned into a proper game, and I knew it was also the most recent of, if recent's the right word, for things that I did nearly 30 years ago. So it would have sort of been my latest things when I was the best at doing this sort of stuff. I was pleasantly surprised to see it had a few things I'd forgotten that I'd done completely, which was nice. So let's get straight in there and have a look at them. Just quickly, this is the Amos disk with its utilities. If I tell it to look at my disk, then we'll see all of the Amos programs that I have here. This is just listing the project files. There's a bunch of other stuff on here. There's image files and sprites and sounds and all of that business. Now if I do set dir when it's finished reading, that should mean I don't have to change to it every time. So I'm going to skip some of these because they're just not actually particularly interesting. This one, PW, was a password thing. I tried to have a little thing so I could, if I wanted to password protect a program, there's nothing to see. It's a blank screen that waits for you to type in the correct password and then does stuff. And if you have access to the source code of the game, then you can just see what the password is. So it's pretty pointless. Let's go straight to bot, because this one was a lot more fun. This is the code for it all. Not particularly advanced, not a lot there because there isn't actually a lot to it anyway. So what we have here is this little turret which turns as you use the joystick left and right. That it's meant to be like a little green man sitting in a swivelly chair inside, which is why he turns left and right as you turn the thing. And so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like 9 different angles on it. And you can shoot on all 9 angles. And I was quite happy with how this turned out, really. Everything seems nice and smooth. It all works. The bullets line up with the guns. It looks like it's shooting properly and everything. So that worked nicely. And then the other side of this was if you push up and down on the joystick, you can control this little robot who runs back and forth. What's going on with the legs there is again like with the one in Boing, where I couldn't figure out how to make it look good walking, so I just had his legs flailing around like a cartoon. This is meant to be that sort of anime style of the legs flailing around quickly, although I don't know if it really works. But anyway, so I think my idea for this game was that you'd be controlling the two things at once. You're shooting down whatever, UFOs, aliens, who knows, which when you shoot them would drop stuff down to the ground, and then you have to send your little robot out to pick them up and bring them back to the turret. And I don't know exactly what I'd planned, but I figured either it would be worth points or you could get materials to make power-ups or who knows what. But I never actually got past the stage. I'm pretty sure what happened, and it's going to be what happens with most of the things on this disc, is that I ended up hitting the limitations of what you could do with this style of doing things. It's a little bit... In Amos or in the Amiga, the things that you display on screen could either be sprites, which had lots of limitations in terms of how big they could be. They couldn't be more than like 16 pixels wide or something. And there were some weird limitations there that made them annoying to work with. Or you could have bobs, which was short for blitter object. The blitter, blitter was like the name of the graphics chip or something. And they could be much bigger. You could have lots more colors. And they were generally sort of better to work with, but there was a hard limit on the number of them you could have on the screen. It was only like 15 or 16 or something. And if you had too many of them moving around, things just slowed down to a crawl. The Amiga was doing a lot more work to actually display them. And so unfortunately for me, that meant when you've got a game like this, you've got the thing, you've got the turret, you've got the robot, you've got bullets all over the screen, to then have spaceships flying around and them presumably shooting at you or something. I assume there'd have to be some sort of danger involved, and materials falling to the ground for the robot to pick up. I just don't think it would have worked. So the real game developers were able to sort of, do their own thing, and I think the clever thing would be to sort of use bobs for the main objects and sprites for the bullets or something, but I don't know, that was beyond me. So while I'm quite happy with how this works, I think it all works quite nicely. It never really got any further than that because I couldn't really do any more with it. So let's quit out of here, go to the next one. And next on the list, we're going to have to start fast-forwarding the loading of the disk each time, am I? Or we're going to be here all day. Okay, the next one is Guy. Now, I think last time I told the sad story of how I lost a disk when a guy accidentally copied over it, not realizing it was my data disk full of my treasured game projects. One of the games that I lost, which I was very upset to lose and I was very proud of, was the one where I first worked out how to do a walk cycle. I actually had a person that walked around the screen and it looked right. The legs actually moved like legs should move. And I lost that one, and so then I sort of had to do it all again from scratch, basically, which was not so much fun. Now this one, this is where I think I was experimenting with a couple of things at once or something. But one of them was I had a new sprite image thing of a guy walking around with the walk cycle. The weird thing was when I first loaded this one up, it didn't actually work. Like I'd saved it in a state where it didn't run, but I could easily fix the few things that weren't working. But unfortunately, one of the problems was it was looking for a bunch of sprites that weren't on this disk for some reason. But there was another one on this disk under the name of safe.abk. I assume I called it safe because I made a backup of it to keep it safe from getting deleted again. I got a little bit paranoid after losing that first lot, it's not quite right. It's obviously not the exact same sprites as the one that I made this game for. But if I load it up, you'll see. So first of all, look at that background. Again, I'm quite happy with how that looks. Once again, the old deluxe paint, I got the hang of. You could do the sort of gradient fill thing, and it was clever enough to do that dithering effect for you to sort of stretch out. That's really only two colours that I'm fading from, but the dithering makes it look like lots. And I'd also worked out how to do the fancy distortion effect, so I could just draw a little cityscape and then reverse it and stretch it out to make the nice looking shadow. So that'll work nicely. But anyway, we have this little dude down the bottom here whose colours are completely wrong because obviously this lot is using a different palette from the one that I originally had intended for this. But if I push right, look at that, he walks. If I push left, so there's another thing, this one obviously doesn't have the frames for moving left, so I push left, the object moves left, but it disappears when it does it. But at any rate, there you go, look at that, look at him walk. Now I have to, and I did feel it didn't punch. It's not a very good punch animation. I don't know why I thought it would be a good idea to step forward on the same leg that you punch with. That's not how punches work. You can duck, put a little duck frame, you can jump, a little bit of animation on the jump, and if you push fire while you're running, he does a little jump kick, a little flying kick thing. So yeah, again, I was most proud of the fact that I got an animation that actually looked like a person walking pretty much how they should. Luckily, on this disk I have lots of image files that I made the sprites from, so I think the way you normally do it is you just draw all the frames onto a single image in a thing like Deluxe Paint, and then Amos has a little sort of sprite grabber program where you just load up your image and then cut out each frame and turn it into a sprite. So I have the image here. You can see I even wireframed out how the walk cycle should work. And true story, I actually, to get the walk cycle the very first time I did it, I actually paced backwards and forwards across my bedroom at the time. I can remember doing that and sort of, stopping to see, okay, when this leg's in this position, what am I doing with that one? And basically got it all going from first principles, and then I was super happy when a little while later I was playing a game. I'm pretty sure it was one of the Turrican games. You had a character running along the screen, and I paused the game for whatever reason and looked at, and what did I see on the screen? But the character was in a position with his legs that looked exactly like one of the frames that I'd done. I thought, look at that, I got it right. That's a professional did that walk cycle, and it looks just like mine. Now it's interesting. This is a walk cycle. This one he is He does actually look like he's just sort of walking purposefully. The other one, and I think the one that you can see in the walk frame, is more of a run cycle, really. The legs kick up a lot more at the back there, which is not really what you do when you're walking, but it is when you're running, which is the first problem I had. I did the cycle and then had the person just sort of swinging their legs while they were walking with their body completely upright, and so you sort of had a walking torso and running legs, which looked a little bit weird. So that's why this guy, I realised, what I need to do is bend his body forwards a bit so he looks like he's striding forwards and have his arms bent and everything. Anyway, that's actually all there is to see in this guy, except for the pretty rainbow effect in the background. That was one of the nice things Amos did. So that gradient, you can just substitute one of the colours you use in your game for a gradient using a simple command, which you should be able to see here. There it goes, set rainbow. There you go, set up a rainbow, replace that colour with the rainbow, and that's it. It was one of the many things Amos let you do very nicely. But that's enough of that for now. Let's move on to the next one. Right, so the next one is Herbie. Now, you recall Herbert was the name I gave to the little yellow guy in Boing, so I think my idea was that Herbie would be like his son and we'd have a new bunch of games with him in it. But anyway, the first thing you'll see when I start this one is this background graphic, which again, it's not much, I suppose, but by my standards, I thought I was really happy with how this turned out. I thought this was a really nice look to it. So you have a scrolling background, again hitting the limitations a little bit because I couldn't. This background, it's 3 screens long, although only 2 of those repeat. You needed to have an extra screen's worth on the side for anyway. Doesn't matter. But it would need to be 3 screens long, which was the longest you could make a background image. So this was all I could do. So I don't know, real game developers had cleverer ways of having scrolling backgrounds, but this was all I could work with. Anyway, the idea was that this would be sort of a title screen, a track sequence sort of thing, with the background slowly scrolling along, and there'd be a title coming up or something, I don't know. Then when you push fire to start, now suddenly you start zooming through space. And here we have little, I guess this was Herbie, who's now 2-3 times as big as he was in the sprite in Boing. He's got a jetpack, he's got fancier sneakers, he's got this funny shield bumper thing in front of him, because I think this was me trying to think of what's the way I can get around the fact that the way I do things I can't have lots of bullets on screen at once. And I thought, what if I give him this little sort of bumper shield thing, and if you push fire it shoots out, and maybe you can use that to just sort of smack aliens away, which probably not the best idea. The other thing, this originally came from the other project that I was quite upset to lose on the disc that got destroyed, was one where you had, again, Herbert looking like this, but just running around on the ground, and there was a cliff, and there were little lemmings jumping off the cliff, which were little rodent things, but of course I made them blue with white faces and green hair, so they looked like lemmings on the classic game Lemmings. And so these things would go jumping off the cliff, and you were walking backwards and forwards holding a bumper like this over your head, and you had to bounce them off your bumper before they hit the ground. And it was, again, it was working really well. And then I just lost the whole thing. So anyway, that's all I have left from that. But I do, again, I have some image files for what I was going to do with this, but never actually could. So I had Herbie here, and I had some aliens, some of them adapted from the enemies from Boing, but that nice little cutesy version of an alien there I think worked out quite nicely, possibly too nicely for me to avoid getting sued for copyright violation if I'd actually tried to use it anywhere. But anyway, I also noticed I have another sheet of sprites for a big and a small Herbert being a lot more active. I guess I was planning on doing more Boing type games as well, but you can see we've got better walking, better jumping. The frames of him I'm not sure if that's him somersaulting through the air or if that's him doing a forward roll along the ground, but either way I did have a bunch more there that at least I can look at now, even if I didn't do anything with it. But once again, that's as far as I got with this idea. So let's move on to the next one. Now this one, Scroll, I won't bother with either. That was just me working out how to do a simple scrolling background like you just saw. But Tester, now Tester, this has historical significance, almost, sort of. What you have to understand is that back in the 90s, computers like Amigas, they'd have a simple joystick with a single button on it, and while you could get nice ones with proper micro switches inside them, the star cursor joystick, was the gold standard there. It was nice and clicky and worked nicely. And indeed, when M kindly donated me this old Amiga, it actually came with a star cursor joystick. It was one that stood the test of time. Although, as I recall, as a teenager, I ended up going through a few of those as well, because they did get better. But the problem was, not all joysticks were that good. A lot of them were quite cheap, and a lot of them just stopped working eventually. But sometimes it was, you couldn't quite be sure if the joystick wasn't working or if the game wasn't reading it right or what was going on. So there was actual value in me for creating a joystick tester utility, which does absolutely nothing, but when you move the joystick around, it gives you feedback to let you know that the game is actually receiving signals from the joystick. So it shows which direction it's going in, it shows that you've pressed the button, and it's got the little icon moving around on the right there, just to show the effect. And then I think if you push a key, then the J changes to an M, and now the mouse is moving it around, and it'll show you that the mouse is going as well. Who remembers the old Amiga style mice that had a ball underneath it that you had to pop out and scrape all the lint off of the rollers to actually make it work? But anyway, this gives you an idea, I guess, of what life could be like. I mean, this is much more elaborate than it needs to be. You can see I've had a lot of fun with my rainbow style gradients in the background and all that sort of stuff, and making it look as pretty as I can. I guess I had ideas that maybe I would put this on a disc one day and it would get out there and people would say, "Good Lord, what an amazingly useful utility, I will use it always." But no, it never left my computer. But I guess I used it from time to time when I needed to. Now, we've seen that. Let's move along. Right, wipe. This is one I'm going to have to fast forward because it takes a little while. So you'll see, it's if you know your program, we've just got a bunch of for loops here, and all they're doing is drawing lines in different degrees. Now when it starts up, you won't be able to see. There we go. Once it gets a bit lighter, what's happening is it's wiping around the screen, filling the screen with one color, getting lighter each time it goes round, and also each time it goes round, it starts a little bit further away from each corner. So it will sort of leave one line behind and fill the rest in. And this was just me messing around, right? This was just me saying, hey, if I set up a loop with to draw these lines, to do a screen wipe effect, and then what would happen if I changed the color every time? And I sort of realized it built up this interesting looking pattern. Now, I'm going to sit here and watch it all complete. There's no reason why you should, so I think I'll fast forward it till we get to the end and you can see the final effect. And there we have the end result. I fancy this sort of starbursty weird gradient pattern. This one's, it's a little bit wonky. It ends up going this weird diagonal because I think the screen's wider than it is tall. So to do the number of loops to fill all the width of it, you end up doubling up and doing extra ones on the vertical. But I eventually I got it to work right, and so you had a nice symmetrical pattern on the screen. And that's all there is for this one. But then, having done that, I used it in another program, which coincidentally is the very next one on the list. So after wipe we get loader. And so this was another idea for one of those loading programs where you put up something interesting to look at while you select a game off whatever disk I decided to put it on, and run the game. So Amos, one of the cool, interesting things it had, I think it's this shift up and shift down command. Basically, you've got a screen palette, 16 colors, was what I usually had, and you could rotate the colors through the palette. So color 1 becomes color 2, and color 2 becomes color 3, and so on, and then color 16 loops around and becomes color 1. And so if you've set up the palette with a gradient of colors in the first place, and then you do this looping, you get like this. So nothing's nothing's animating on the screen. All it's doing is swapping the color values around, but because of the way it's laid out, you get this fancy effect. And then I found lots of different ways you could manipulate it. And if you push the help key, if you never had an Amiga, the Amiga actually had a specific help key on the keyboard, which games never ever really used that I recall. But it's, I guess, the equivalent of hitting F1 on a Windows computer these days. But if you press the help key, then little instructions pop up along the top there. Change the speed, change the palette. So I programmed in a bunch of palettes, and then it will say select a game. Not that there were any games to select in this one. Anyway, so if I do S for speed, I can make it go really slow. I can make it go really fast. I can make it go slightly more sedate, which I think is where it started. And then the colours, so it starts being all blue, you can have it all green, you can have it all red, you can have it greyish, sort of silvery looking. You can have this one that I almost kind of discovered by mistake, which I thought gave a really nice golden effect, shading from yellow to sort of brown, reddish brown. And then this last one, I suppose I should give an epilepsy warning here. I don't know if this is the sort of thing that could trigger a seizure, but just in case, if you're prone to those sorts of things, you might want to look away for a second as I do this, and oh, isn't that spectacular? I just loved that. That was quite trippy. Okay, enough of that. That was again a case of a little utility that I thought might come in handy one day, but I never actually used, but that's okay. What else have we got? Next one up is Froggy. Again, another, I don't know if this came before or after the bot one, but it's the same sort of idea. The first thing we'll see is it asks you, do you want mouse and joystick or mouse only? I'll say, should I say mouse only? So the idea is you've got this little frog. You can see he's a little frog because when he looks like a little green blob, but when he turns around, he's actually a cute frog that I drew. I sort of drew the Froggy character and then realised, hang on, if he's going to be looking upwards this way, you really want to have his back to you, but with his back to you, you can barely tell that he's a frog, so then I had him look around when he's not doing anything. But the idea is he shoots out, I guess he's meant to be spitting blobs of water or something, and shoots down the insects. And again, we sort of had the slight limitation of the number of things I could have on screen at once. Because of the mouse and joystick thing, so he can also move. So if you're using a mouse and a joystick, you can have one hand on the joystick moving him left and right, and the mouse using the cursor, whereas mouse only controls if you push the left button to shoot, hold down the right button, and he moves towards the cursor, which is a bit more cumbersome, but whatever. One thing, if you look, when you shoot far away, his bullets shoot really fast. When you shoot up close, they move quite slowly. That's because in Amos, the easiest thing to make a thing move was, say, move from here to here over this amount of time. But unfortunately, if the distance from here to here changes and the same amount of time stays the same, that means the bullets have a different speed. And if I were a little bit cleverer, I would have been able to work out fairly easily, I think, a different way of doing things that would calculate how fast it needed to be moving and do it like that. But I didn't have the maths for it at the time, so that's all we get. But again, another thing, I guess I don't really know what I thought was going to happen here. I don't see how this... I mean, I did make a little game where you just do nothing but shoot soldiers who explode into a bloody mist, and that's it. But I think I wanted something a bit more from this, but I don't see what there was to do here apart from shoot at these things. Obviously, I didn't get the collisions working. You can't shoot them down yet. But I don't see how I would have made this difficult. I guess maybe they're shooting at you and you've got to move, and it basically becomes like a Space Invaders, essentially. But this is another concept that I got this far and then never really did anything more with. So what else can we see? Right, text display is another one I won't bother with. This was just me working out how to have text writing itself across the screen. Had a whole big screen full of text to display, which is mildly amusing, but mostly not. So let's quickly... This was me experimenting with maths. I guess I'd learned about trigonometry in high school maths by this point, and I was using the cosine and sine functions to draw circular patterns. There's very little to this. It was just me seeing, so there you go. If you stick your sines and your cosines into a thing with a constant radius and put it in a loop, and it draws yourself a circle. On the other hand, then I realized, well, hang on, that's with keeping the radius the same every step. What if I start the radius small and make it bigger? Well, in that case, you can just keep running the loop and it draws a great big spiral, a nice regularly spaced spiral. And that's literally all there is to this one. I think this was just me, yeah, working out how maths works. So maybe I could have done something interesting with this at some stage, but I never did. It was just for my own interest. And finally, we come to the last one on this disc, and it's nice that this list happened to have this one. I don't know, is this ordered? Maybe it's ordered by like the save date, so it shows the ones down the bottom are the ones I had worked on the most recently. But I don't think that's true. But at any rate, the very last on the list is Zappo. Much like The Little Guys, Zappo was the title I gave this game right to begin with because I couldn't think of a better one. And thinking, oh, I'll come up with a better name. I came up with a different name. We'll see that in a sec. But here's the great thing about Amos was it's basic, and all that basic languages do is they just run from start to finish, and that's all they do. And you can put in loops, and you can sort of make it jump around the code a bit, and you can do things to say just wait there until something happens, and then carry on running the rest of the program. But it's pretty unsophisticated. But Amos did this great thing where you could set up all these little bits here, like little sub-programs, little sub-routines or something that you could then assign to stuff so that they would be doing their own thing while the game was running the main loop, and it worked really well. But enough technical stuff. So here's my game. Going to take a while to load because it's loading up a bunch of stuff, but then you'll see instead of calling it Zappo, excessive violence with really big guns. I mean, it says what it means and means what it says, I suppose. So I think this title screen was basically the limit of my artistic abilities. I think I've always been hopeless at drawing perspective. I don't get it. Everything I do is either side on or front on. So drawing this little dude up in the corner with his legs on different angles, firing a gun on a funny angle, that took me a while, I'm ashamed to say. And it was really the best I could do. But still, I'm still happy with how this one looks. So if you remember back when I looked over The Little Guys, I said eventually I did a different one that was kind of The Little Guys 2.0, and that's this one. This is me, I guess, expanding on the idea of that, trying to turn it into an actual game instead of just something that's a little bit funny to look at. So there are a few different game modes here. I'll choose best of 5. So it's the same thing again. Okay, there we go. That guy, I've got a mouse controlling the joystick at the moment, so he wiggles around. You'll notice the 1812 overture sample there. I had some interesting, I'd found some interesting things around, including when this guy dies and falls out.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
I guess I thought that was funny. But so the idea is we've got two guys. They're much smaller, so you can use a lot more of the screen. They're spacemen and jetpacks instead of cutesy guys with booster rockets coming out of their feet for no good reason. So I think it all sort of looks a bit better. You've got these obstacles in the middle of the screen that just move up and down at random, which kill you if you hit them. So that's just to complicate things a little bit, so you're not just chasing each other around an empty screen. So you've got these swords to begin with that make identical little swooshes. One thing I never finished working on this game. One thing I never did was make them stay with you. So you see, as you move around, the swoosh stays where it was when you push the button. But anyway, now you'll notice these power-ups showing up. I had a power-up system. So you get the first one, and you go from the sword to a pistol that has a little bit of range, which puts you at an advantage over the other one. With another power-up, and you've got a rifle that shoots even further and will actually do more damage as well. Let's a few shots at that guy. I'm just quite happy with the little hit down in the middle bottom there, where that fades out. So we go 3 shots from the rifles, enough to kill the dude. Anyway, you keep your power-ups in between rounds, which keeps things interesting. Where's the next one? Did I put? It must be on a random timer when they appear as well as we see. Another one! And you have rocket launchers that shoot missiles and occasionally make you have a bit of kickback and have this boom. I think that was supposed to happen every time. I'm not quite sure why it doesn't happen every single time. Maybe it's another objects on screen limit thing. Anyway, and then if I get another power-up, where's another power-up? Oh, it's convenient. Now you get Giant Gun, which fires out these huge balls and makes the sound effect thub, I guess sounded about right to me. And one of these will kill a guy in a hit. Oh, unless the recoil knocks me into one of those.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Okay. Take my word for it that one of those will kill the other guy. Now, you keep your power-ups between rounds, which has the potential to make things a little unfair, but if, having got the biggest gun, you pick up a power-up, you go back to a sword. And so that sort of means that once you're at the maximum level, you've got to avoid the power-ups, which gives the other person a chance to get themselves on a level with you. And so that's it now. I'd like to think it's a fair bit more sophisticated than the Little Guys was, but it's the same basic concept, two people running around trying to splat each other. Now, how many kills have I had? If it was best of 5, will this win me the match? Has he died 3 times yet? Yes, he has. There we go. And then you get the titles. Then you get the victory screen, which, again, when I said before I could only really draw things that were front-on or side-on. Here we go. Here's your completely front-on space dude with his big gun and his rocket launcher on his shoulder or something. And if player 2 win, of course, then this was the exact same screen, but it was all red-coloured to match the red guy. And so that's how that one worked. And again, I was quite happy with how this was all working. Everything did how I wanted it to do. Everything acted how I wanted it to act, did what I wanted it to do. But that was it. And so I can only assume that after I worked on this one, I just kind of, this was the point where the Amiga kind of died a death, and I was onto using PCs and kind of gave up making games in Amos. I don't know. But so that's the end of my discs. You've seen everything there is to see now. I think after this I will do one more video where I go over the whole process from start to finish, because it was a little bit broken up into parts originally, and it'd be nice to just run through the entire thing as a bit of a conclusion, a bit of a summing up. The other thing I actually thought I might do, since I have all of these image files that have all the graphics for these games, a thing I could do is actually take these resources and bring them into the Game Maker, the thing that I've been using to make games recently, and actually try to make games based on my old games. That actually could be a fun thing to do. I could get these things that I was happy with and see if I can actually turn them into something properly worthwhile. But that's for another time. For now, I hope you've enjoyed this look through the works of a 15-year-old computer geek in the early 90s. And I don't think there's anything more to say, but thank you for watching.